we have docs where I tell them, hey, if it's a male doc, you may not be interested in getting that number down, but ask your wife maybe or your spouse, if they would like an extra $2,000 a month, right? Because they may not, like, this is a good practice, but it could be way better. So just some quick math, and we're going to show you why we want to take this even a step further. This is a great P&L. This is the P&L we use, but we put it into some charts. But let's just do some back of the napkin math, because why not, right? It's only, what time is it here? 7 almost. So say we get this down to 5%. That's 2.8%. Let's just say it's 2%. What's 2% of $340,000? About $7,000, right? Over 3 months. So assume that trend continues. Now it's $7,000 times 4, $28,000 a year. Where does that money go to if we cut it out of here? Right down to here, right? So we'd shave off 2.8%, meaning this goes up to 56.8, almost 57 cents on the dollar. This goes up by 28,000. Despite it being a good practice, that's why this is important. It could be better. The other key insight, I think, here is marketing's too low. We know that because we want to spend a little more on marketing. But why would I say marketing's too low? It seems like percentages should be lower, expenses should be lower. Marketing's kind of a tricky one. Why? Good. Because what goes up? Good. And as income goes up, if expenses stay the same, the percentage drops. So we keep, the expenses drop as a percentage, and the net profit or net operating income goes up. 18.5% for labor costs, good or bad? Why is it good? What should it be? So less than 25. Okay, great. What if it was 5? Would that be good? 5%?
Probably underpaying.
Super staff are really unhappy staff, yeah.
Well, the percentage doesn't tell us everything, right? Because it's payroll expenses divided by revenue. So 5% could mean I'm paying someone 5 cents and I have revenue of $1 and I'm at 5%. Like, we're doing really well. Not great. But at what point does it become too low, and at what point is it okay, and at what point is it too high? So let's do the easier one. What's too high? You said it. Anything over what? Anything over 25. 30% or higher is definitely red zone. Like, whoa, what's going on? What are my options there to lower the expense at that point? One is increase production, which is hopefully increasing collections and revenue. Yeah, increase the bottom number on my equation. What's the other one? Cut the dead weight, not the preferred for employees, right? Cut morale at the same time. So not the best one, but I could cut pay, I could cut hours, I could cut days, I could cut people, I could cut all kinds of things. The best one hopefully is raise revenue, but potentially that one as well. Well, what happens when I get down to 18% though? What does that mean? What do you think is happening to morale if that starts dropping to 15%? What does that mean the team's doing? They sure are. And they may do that temporarily. But they may also get sick of potentially, my guess in a practice like that, it would be working through lunches, staying late, maybe not getting paid for overtime potentially, or they're just carrying someone else's load and have some resentment. So this number, when it gets too low, kind of tells us, hey, we could actually hire and probably grow revenue. Here's the back of the napkin number you should know. I like back of the napkin. I like all the detail as well, but it's nice to have heuristics, rules of thumb, right? How do I make decisions quickly? How do I know if I can hire a girl or guy and pay them $10 an hour? How much do I need to increase my revenue per hour? My collections per hour. If I pay them 10 an hour, my goal is 25% or less. What do they have to help me bring in? Yeah, right, an hour. So that's a useful number, right? So, okay, I'm thinking, oh, should I hire someone or not? Well, what if I pay them $10 an hour? Well, if I want to keep my percentage at 25% and I'm adding $10 per hour, I've also got to add in $40 an hour in collections. So quick math, $10 an hour, 40 hours a week, 4 weeks a month. That's $1,600 that I'm paying someone without payroll taxes, which are part of payroll, without maybe scrubs, which I would also consider payroll, without potentially CE, which I would consider payroll. So $1,600 or more, probably closer to $2,000 is what I'm paying them. They have to help me bring in now how much a month? 8, right? At least 8,000 in additional collections. It's a good way to think about it. Okay, good. We also can still break these out, but this is the simple way to do it. So we can break out and say, hey, what is all this facility stuff? Well, you called it just facility, but we actually break it out so you can see rent expense, repair and maintenance, utilities, and so on. We can break out the wages and kind of drill down and see what's going on. So that's a lot of numbers. Let's just talk about what those are made up of. So payroll, stuff I just went over. You know, training people is really expensive. There's a joke. You know, what if we spend all this money training these people and then they leave? And the comeback is, well, what if we don't train them at all and they stick around, right? Like, oh, now we don't have any trained people here. Like, it's expensive, but it's worth it. OG&A, so this is the question, right? So all of this kind of stuff, accounting fees, supplies. So supplies and labs are interesting because implants, do they go in supplier labs or lab expense? It doesn't really matter to us so much because we combine the two as we add the percentage. So we hope that supplies around 6%, labs around 9%. Most of our clients are around 6 or 7% for lab. But we just add them together just in case, and we look at it as a 15%. So facility, marketing, and there's basically our 6 categories. So let's walk through here. Any questions so far? Anything to add, Mason? Okay. All right. So let's walk through just a generic P&L, kind of like we had. So we basically want the 6 categories. It's, you know, there's simplicity and there's simplistic. We want ours to be very simple, but simple on the other side of complex. So we take a lot of data, a lot of things that are going on. It's hard to make it this simple in a lot of ways, but that's what the P&L should look like for decision-making purposes. So basically now we have our goals. I just want you to see our goal is 61.5 or 60%, somewhere right around there. Most of the clients we work with are under 60, which is good. That's before they pay themselves. Some of our clients have multiple practices and multiple associates, so their overhead goal may be more like 81%. Okay, and that's just simple math. Whatever the doctor is collecting or whatever restorative is as a percentage of all collections, so there's restorative and hygiene. So if the doc's doing somewhere around 70% of collections, you know, restorative wise, and they're paid around 30% of collections, then that's about another 20%, 70 times 30, 21%. So it adds another 20% or so to that. That's the way we do it. And they've been able to hit their metrics when we do this. So great. Is this exciting for you guys? It's super important. Like it or not, Warren Buffett, right, the most famous investor of all time, says accounting is the language of business. You got to know it. Any additional comment on that? Yeah.
Real quick, Dr. Ryman, sorry, before they'd asked us to repeat the questions just because they can't hear them back there. So the question was, overtime, as a small business required to pay overtime?
So you have to decide whether or not you want to pay overtime over 8 hours every day. So you want to consider whether you want to pay overtime for 8 hours every given day. So if you work 8.5 hours, you're going to pay that person half an hour of overtime if they make less than 1.5 times minimum wage. All right, remember when Mr. Rosado was here from Managed Pay? And he said, you have to pay employees overtime if they work more than 40 hours a week, regardless of how much you pay them. But if they make less than 1.5 times minimum wage in the state of Nevada, you can only work them 8 hours in a 24-hour period, and any time that they work over that in a 24-hour period, you have to pay them overtime. Okay? So that becomes crucial, like if you're running a business that is open 24 hours a day, or you run an extended hours, like in your practice dream, your husband may come in at 7 and work till 2, you come in at 2 and work till 7. Well, you can't have the same employee cover that entire 12-hour period as an assistant unless you're paying them a certain amount. But remember, once they hit that 40 hours in that work week, they're going to start making overtime. So that's when, as these guys were saying, you may decide to hire temporary staff. You may hire a bunch of temporary employees and maybe just one lead assistant, and everybody comes in and works a different hour at a different rate. So yeah, it becomes very important that you just keep an eye on that clock when your patients are, when your staff is working through lunch. They're on the clock. You know, they're entitled to a 15-minute break every 4 hours, right? And there are some employees that will go, sorry, doctor, it's time for my break. I got to go to have a cigarette, have a cup of coffee, or whatever. Now, a lot of those people, if you're a good employer, they're going to work with you. But they're going to also come to you, hey, I worked through lunch. Can I leave early? You know, so again, it's all about managing your staff. Does that answer your question? Did I answer the question correctly?
You did. It was great. He did qualify there, yeah, because it is important to check the state you're in. Nevada is more stringent with the daily rate. If I'm in Utah and most other states around, it's we're just going by the week. So if you wanted to, if you're only open 4 days, you work 4 10s, for example, that's fine as long as it's not over by the over the week. So yeah, it's always important as you guys will move around throughout the years that you check the state you're in as well.
Yep. Good question. Any other questions? Okay.
Let me ask you a question
Yep.
about the payroll.
Yeah.
Do you include the cost of running the payroll, whether it's through your company or through Paycheck or whatever?
No, you can answer it.
I was gonna say he's asking, do we throw the fee in there?
Yeah.
I would say if you're using a payroll company and you're paying the fee, separate from that, they're probably billing that with your payroll, and naturally it would probably fall in there. Yeah. So with our service, that's just inclusive in our overall monthly fee. So we don't break that out specifically though.
Yeah, so that's good. That's a good question. Okay, this is very useful for decision making. I already gave the example, like, should I hire someone? Or, hey, I think we need to hire. Say some team member comes to you, I think we need to hire another assistant. And the crucial words there that I hear are I think or I feel. Let's say they say something like that. Or I met a doc and he said, we just need more new patients. Well, he had no hygiene openings for about 3 months. So I say the best way to kill a really bad practice is with really great marketing. Like, basically what I'm saying is, here's something that's not great. I want to tell everyone about it. Now, if I go advertise, come in, we're the best, we can get you in, and it's call and the front desk says, yeah, our next appointment is in 4 months. Not great, right? So that's one of those things. I need to know my hygiene capacity. How many openings do I have? Do I have pre-blocks for new patients? How long is the new patient pre-block? Is it an hour? Is it 90 minutes? What's included? How do we standardize it? All that becomes very useful for decision making. There's a good quote on that. I attribute it to Andy Grove, who was the CEO of Intel. Basically said, if we have data, we're going to use data for decision making. If we have a lot of opinions, well, we'll just go with mine, right? So like we use data to back up what we're talking about. So I want to take it a step further though, because the P&Ls, your eyes might gloss over. I feel like that's a pretty sexy P&L, to be honest. relative to that first one that had a bunch of items, you know, this one's pretty simple. But I wanted to see it in graph format because this is even more helpful for decision making. So quarterly revenue by year. So I've got Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, years 2015 through 2018 color coded. So what do I know about Q1 2018? What do I know? How'd they do? Better in terms of revenue? Very good. So that number is what? Maybe around 300,000, a little less. So they did an extra 37,000 in revenue, extra 10K a month or so. That's probably lower than 3. Pretty good, right? Okay, well, here's what it looks like when we look at net profit as a percentage. Okay, so remember, this is that other P&L where it was 54% was their net profit. Q1 of 2018, they were 9.5%. Now it's positive, that's great. And that's a pretty healthy business, about a 10% net profit margin. Most people would take that. But it's red because I want it to be, in this case, 18.5%. What that means is for every dollar I keep 18.5 cents. And the inverse of that is my expenses are now 81.5%. Now, if you remember, I said originally we want the overhead to be around 60% or 61.5. This is 81.5. But I did say why that would be the case. Do you remember? What do you think is happening in this practice? Why is the goal 81.5 instead of 61.5? Great. So it's his first practice. He's looking to open a second now, but he brought in an associate. So there is an associate in the practice working with him. So his wage is not included, but the associate's is. So now it's gone up. In Q1 of 2017, he did not have an associate, and he got 28 cents, which is 3 times the net profit percentage compared to Q1 2018. So remember, you said quarterly, the Q1 revenue went up substantially. What that means is he worked a heck of a lot harder to make less money, right? So here we've got the dollar amount of net profit. So that 9.5% is the equivalent of 32,000. And in Q1, he made 71,000 by doing 50K less in dentistry without the headache potentially of an associate. Now, that's not the whole story, right? There's other factors, and it's growing and all of this. This is a really good client. When I started working with him, he had another doctor in there, and it just was not a 2-doc practice. It was going to kill the practice. He was making less money to pay the associate, and it just wasn't on the growth curve. I had to give him the hard news of, really, right now, you're not a 2-doc practice. It wasn't even 5 days a week or 6 days a week or anything. It was 4 days a week, and it just wasn't going to cut it. So he listened to me, which was great. I was very disciplined, and we had to let that associate go, which turned out to be his brother. It's very tricky. And it worked out well. He actually works here in Vegas, and he makes more money now. They both make more money. The great thing is this dentist he produced more within a couple months of his brother leaving than they did together. So the practice started doing even better with just 1 doc than it did with 2. And then he started working 5 days a week. He started opening more. He started getting more new patients. We made some operational changes for efficiency purposes. And then it made sense to bring on another doc within a year. But it just couldn't happen on day 1. But anyway, so pretty good practice. But this is why I want to know not just revenue, but also net profit. So then we break down each one. And the beauty of this, facility costs, right, rent and all of that, they're more fixed costs. So regardless of what we do, they're not going to change. Yes, we can negotiate the lease. We could do some things on that end. But for the most part, it's hard to drive that down as a fixed cost. If we don't do any business, we're paying rent, paying phone, those sorts of things. OG&A. His OG&A costs went up, and we just have this turn red. So even though his numbers look pretty good, he's making a profit. That's despite these numbers being too high 5% difference between the 10.5 and the 15. 5% of 337,000 is, about $15,000 that again drops to the bottom line. Would you like an extra 15,000 over, 3 months? Supplies. So this is a big one. So if you guys are owning practices, we recommend getting a lead assistant, giving them the tools to know how to hit their number, then giving them the data in almost real time so they know where their number's at. This is where the magic happens as well. Supplies. Is an autoclave a supply? Why not? What? Okay. So what do we do with autoclave? Okay. And as accountants, what do we do with it?
There you go. Appreciate it. Yeah.
And why? What happens when we depreciate it? Very magical. Tell me more.
The idea with depreciation, as you said, we don't consume it. It's a purchase that we're making that's supposedly going to contribute to the production of revenue over a certain amount of time. So instead of taking all the expense right now against the revenue from 1 month or even a year, we're going to take that expense against multiple years. Now, when it comes to taxes, I want to expense it now because I want to save the money now. So, yeah, we have some things you can do from tax planning standpoint on depreciation versus if I want to take this financial to an investor or a bank or something, I might want to show more profit with the exact same numbers of expenses. And the banks understand it. We're not trying to, fool them with anything that way. But there's different purposes in with depreciation. But the overall idea is allocating the expense over time.
Yeah. And we all do this personally, right? Like the IRS, how much money did it make? Well, hardly any. Like, I want to go buy a house, so I make a lot of money, right? Like, it just depends kind of thing. So that's great. For one thing, an autoclave at $6,000 or whatever it is, that's going to really hurt my supply costs. So if I'm the lead assistant and you've given me the task and I'm a good lead assistant, and to me, the way I define good or bad lead assistant, to me, at least one measure is, do I try and hit my metric or not? When you train me, do I respond and am I pretty resilient and I want to be better and I'm not offended by it? Or do I just say, here are 5 reasons why that's stupid, and I push back and I gossip and I have a lot of drama? But if I'm a good assistant and you tell me, this is my goal, well, I want to know, how do I define supplies? Because if you're going to lump in an ultrasonic or an autoclave or basically any kind of $1,000 item or more as a rule of thumb, I want that out of my supplies, and I want that in my equipment for depreciation and tax purposes, but also so it doesn't kill my number, right? So the way we work with them is we send them, hey, here's everything we classified as supplies. Here's everything we classified as lab. Help us out, right? It becomes super practical now, super relevant, and a way to make sure our supply costs are in line. So now I'm assigning someone in my practice a line item on my profit and loss statement. Most dentists do not do that, by the way, but that's amazing. My lead assistant now knows there's an ordering system, how to achieve that, and she knows what should my supply costs be, what are they, and when it comes time to do any sort of performance review, I can look back over the last 90 days. How did I do? Black and white. It's not, I don't like your hair. It's, you hit your number or not. It becomes very easy, and I'm not saying that's the only thing you base your decision on, but it's certainly one of them that comes into play. Everyone in the practice should have at least one metric they're responsible for, typically quantitative, black and white, measurable. Then it's your job to make them succeed in hitting that metric and giving them the tools to be able to do that. So this assistant's going to receive that report and say, actually, this Shine bill, it needs to be broken out, because on our end, we receive it and it says Henry Shine X dollars. Well, that's whether you ordered, cotton rolls 2x2s or an ultrasonic or autoclave or whatever the case may be. So we need to break that out. So now the assistant's kind of helping. And they're in the trenches almost, because they're the ones doing it day to day. And it may sound a little bit hefty in the beginning, but really once they do that for a couple months, that thing's on autopilot. And we've just seen it night and day where it's somewhere around the 9 or 10%. They start using some of the tools that we have, and it drops to around the 6%, which is a huge difference, right? $1 million practice, 3%. How much is that? $30,000. Now it's like, do you want to hire an extra employee? $30,000 a year, or do you want to take that home? It goes straight to the bottom line, right? But that's why this becomes really useful. So labs, another one, labs through the roof. So I met with this dentist and I said, you are paying about close to $180 a crown. I feel like, I didn't even say I feel like, because I don't like that. I said, you could, pay Glidewell, DDS, or some other labs that we work with, $99 or even as low as $73. They're not bad crowns, by the way. So I know you could buy a cheap bad crown. That's not the goal. Same or better quality at a lower price, why not? Part of the problem is the patients don't even know that he's paying for expensive crowns, so there's no communication of value to patients. Or he's not charging them more if he does a better quality crown, and so they don't perceive the value either. It's all the same to them. A crown is a crown. So we actually met with the lab guy. So we sit down. It was just a local lab guy. And he kind of started crying, actually, and threw a big fit. We were just trying to negotiate because, right, what are my options? I can either go to a new lab. What's my other option? Here's the deal. The lab guy was the office manager's son-in-law. So it's very difficult now. And he was friends with the guy. Now, he's friends at the cost of $180 a crown. 50 crowns a month. He could save an $80 per crown, $4,000 is what I said. You may not care. I'm just telling you that's $4,000 you could take home. This is why I say if you don't want it, ask your wife if she'd rather have it. Because that friendship's costing you a lot. I don't like my friends to rate me is what I really said. Because it's just outrageous to me. It's obscene. So we met with the lab guy and we got the price down to $140. Still crazy high for me, but better, right? If you're not going to switch, let's at least negotiate. The guy was crying. It was a whole big deal. It's crazy. And even this week, so I met with him again, and we just figured out what's your average. Why is it so high? It's still 15%. It should be 9% or half of that, right? Huge. It's about $80,000 a year difference. And we looked at all the crowns because, he's paying different amounts for different crowns. And it came out to an average of $200 per crown, even after we had negotiated it down to $140. So we had to push even more, drill down what's going on there. Well, what's happening? What else raises lab fees?